By cutting a ribbon, Mayor Jay Moran signaled a beginning and an end. Keene is officially open for business now, and the district has closed a chapter that took 25 plus years to complete, but now has every K-6 student in town learning in an impressive state-of-the-art building. Highland Park is now our oldest new elementary school, which is saying something. And there's Waddell with its indoor slide, and Verplank with its non-BOE but adjacent splash pad, and Buckley, home of the solar flower, and Bowers looking great on Princeton Street, and now Keene. And next stop for these elementary students is Bennett and the Cheney building, those among the most architecturally awesome buildings in town. All of these places are beautiful, but there's more, as BOE Secretary Stacy Patterson reminded the group gathered at the Keene ribbon cutting.
Additionally, Manchester is now home to 3 of 4 net zero schools, demonstrating our district's and our town's commitment, not just to education, but to environmental stewardship for generations to come.
Manchester has lots to brag about, but to really appreciate how far the district has come, you need to know what things were like a generation ago. Back then, Manchester had 10 elementary schools, and all were in rough shape, as were Bennett, Illing, and the high school. Plus, in our K-5 schools, we were out of compliance with the state racial balance law. Committees were formed and studies done, and in 1999, a plan was presented to voters to spend $100 million to patch up the elementary schools. But voters said no. Too much money, and it didn't address the big buildings. 3 years later, there was another plan presented, $139 million for a new high school off Wetherell Street, moving grades 7 and 8 into the current MHS building, putting grades 5 and 6 into the current Illing building, losing Bennett, and patching up the elementaries. That plan failed too. Fast forward to 2012 and another committee, this one called the School Modernization and Reinvestment Team Revisited. And this brings us back to the Keene event and to a local lawyer named Brian Murphy, who's now the town's building committee chairman.
I sat at the first Smarter Committee meeting, and I was with Representative Doucette and many others, and we were kind of wondering, okay, what's the plan? And so we talked about, we did a lot of study and data collection and planning, and we wanted to renovate all the elementary schools to include the latest technology, maintain class sizes, maximize state reimbursement, and other goals. And we came up with a plan, as Mayor Moran mentioned. And so here's a brochure from 2014, which said that, gee, after the Smarter Committee finished their work in 2012 and 13, and they came up with this timeline. And here's a timeline that says we would get the Cheney, Bennett, Waddell, Verplank, Bowers, Keene, and Buckley all done by fall of 2024 opening. And guess what? We did it.
Yes, they did it. And as Brian went on to say, it took contribution from so many people, most critically the voters of Manchester, but also members of the BOD and the BOE and school and town staff and so many more. The Smarter Committee spent countless hours studying data and weighing options and eventually determined that the best path forward meant having fewer but bigger elementary schools. And the community was on board this time. In 2014, voters approved an $84.2 million plan to fund work at Cheney, Waddell, and Verplank. 5 years later, they came through again, approving $93 million for the Buckley, Bowers, and Keene phase. As for the former elementary schools, Nathan Hale is being retrofitted for apartments, and Martin is now a preschool center. As for Washington and Robertson, we'll have to wait and see. Also, Illing and MHS need work, but otherwise, building-wise, the Manchester School District is in great shape. And with that, we'll go back to Keene one more time to hear from Superintendent Matt Geary.
Through 12 years of moving kids around, with a once-in-a-generation global pandemic thrown in, what we have happening in the schools are reading scores up by 3 points, math scores up by 4 points, science scores up by 9 points, deep investments in STEM. You're going to see the STEM lab. We have chronic absence down below 21% from a high of 36% during the pandemic. Again, adults doing a lot of work. We have mental health support for increasing numbers of mental health concerns with community health resources and counselors in schools, seeing over 300 students last year to provide counseling otherwise that they wouldn't have. At our secondary schools, if you probably read this, we understand the deep concerns about social media and devices, so we're going after the devices. We want kids engaged, focused, and spending less time on devices in secondary schools. And finally, these students eventually will go to the high school where we have added AP classes, we have more classes, more people taking tests, and 75% of students eligible for college credit when they walk out. 41 different courses at Manchester High School that kids, Keene Cubs, who are going to be future Red Hawks, can access. So sometimes, because it can't fit on the sign, we don't get to say all of those things, and this is my last opportunity at a space where people come to hear about buildings, to talk instead about what happens inside the buildings. And what happens every day inside these gorgeous buildings is